Okay, can you see the PowerPoint now?
Yes, yes, Dr. David.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I'm sorry for that. No, there was concern. No? So going back to item 8, the item STEM is asking us what processes are relevant when a teacher designs a performance task worksheet for the students. And in, this is an example of an item, no, wherein there's several steps or procedures that we can select, no. And in this case, it's asking for the which of the four, no, are relevant, no. But if you look at the options from option A to option D, it actually includes three processes, no, three out of the four processes. So that means that when we try to answer this particular item, we can actually just look, no, which of the four processes, no, from 1 to 4 is actually the least relevant or the least important. And therefore, once we are able to identify which process is the least relevant, then we can look for the option that exclude that particular process. Okay. So number 1 is select learners who have the resources in performing the task. Number 2, accompany its task with clear directions and appropriate scoring tools. 3, integrate performance tasks that have 2 or more competencies. And 4, provide learners with flexibility in accomplishing performance tasks. And if you notice, all processes are actually relevant except for process number 1, selecting learners who have the resources in performing the task. Okay, yeah, because it doesn't matter, if a learner has resources or not in performing a task. That should not be the primary consideration. It should not even be the secondary consideration in actually providing or designing performance tasks. No, maybe third, fourth consideration, but it should not be among the primary considerations in actually designing a performance task. So therefore, it's the least relevant among all four processes. So we just need to look for options, no, that for the option that exclude this particular process. That's why the answer is option B. Okay, because it's the one that exclude option process number 1, which is the least relevant among the four processes provided. So let's see if our teachers were able to answer them this item correctly. Okay, so slightly good results, no? Majority of the teachers who took the test, the inventory, actually obtained the best answer, no, or the correct answer. That's option B. Okay, some answered option A. Let's see why they want to exclude option 3. Integrate performance tasks that have 2 or more competencies. Okay, so maybe they're thinking that we should not complicate the performance task, no? But actually, it's actually better, no, to come up with performance tasks that we can actually be more comprehensive. Okay, that is and holistic, so that's able to actually assess 2 or more competencies. So it's actually good, no, if our performance task can actually assess more than one competency, no? Because one of the principles of assessment is we want it to be comprehensive, holistic, among other things, no? And obviously, it will also be helpful to teachers, no? Because you will have lesser number of assessment tasks because you are able to measure more competencies just using one or a few assessment strategies, as opposed to having several tasks or strategies that's measure only very, very specific competency. Then that could actually be a burden, no, to you in terms of preparation, as well as for the students. No, it will also be a burden to them when it comes, because they'll be taking a lot of assessment tasks, especially if they are performance tasks in nature. Okay, so we move on now with competency number 3, and at this point, as we move on to item 9 and the rest of the items for competency 3 and maybe up to competency 5, I'll be requesting, no, the participation of our teachers who are in the room with us, no, Teacher Arlene, Teacher Lloyd, Teacher Maricel, Teacher Mylene, and Teacher Noreen. Okay, so I'll be calling you one by one to read the item STEM and the options, no, of a particular item as we move along in the in this particular presentation. Okay, so let's revisit competency 3. it's about teachers, no, being skilled in administering, scoring, and interpreting the results of both externally produced and teacher-produced assessment methods. So earlier, it's about designing, maybe selecting assessment tools. For competency 3, administration, scoring, and interpretation na ang skills na inahanap na dapat meron nga ang mga teachers, no? Whether this is something that's developed by the teachers themselves, sabi nga natin, teacher-made tests, teacher-made tools, or something externally produced that teachers can actually adapt and utilize for their classroom assessment purposes. Okay, for item 9, may I request Teacher Arlene to read the item stem and the options. Teacher Arlene.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Which of the following is an acceptable test-taking behavior when students answer each section of a standardized test that is timed separately? Option number, letter A, Mary finishes the vocabulary section early. She checks her answers on the previous test section. For letter B, John finishes the vocabulary section early. He then rechecks many of his answers in that section. For letter C, Bob did not finish the vocabulary section. He continues to work in that section when the testing time is up. While the last, for letter D, Jane finishes the vocabulary section early. She looks ahead at the next test section, but does not mark her answer sheet for any of those items. Thank you.
Thank you, Teacher Arlene. And again, those who are, although the item option, no, options are a little bit lengthy. Those who are watching live, okay, can you determine, no, of course, on your own if option A, option B, or C or D is the best answer, no, for this particular item. Now, which of the following is an acceptable test-taking behavior? No? So it gives us the impression that the other option outside of the best answer is either unacceptable or acceptable, but only to a certain extent. Okay, and the best answer is letter B. John finishes the vocabulary section early. He then rechecks many of his answers in that section. So there's no problem with this, no? Because if you're a particular student is done with a section of a test, then he can always recheck his answers or her answers in that particular section. Okay, so option A is not a plausible behavior because you cannot go back. You're not supposed to go back in the previous sections anymore. No, this is time. Okay. Also, option C, you should not. No? This is even less acceptable. No, you should not work on that section with the testing times already completed. No, because some tests, the time is very important. It's actually essential to the assessment. No, especially if it's what we call as a speed test. No, remember in tests, sometimes we can have a speed test or we can have a power test. No? So typically, speed tests have easier items, but the time is very much limited. No? Like many IQ tests are like that. Okay, so if you're done with a particular section, no students, no examinees should work on a particular section where the time is already up. So no one's supposed to answer already when we are done with a particular section. No? Option D. Okay, so this is also not acceptable. No, looking ahead on the next test, even if you will not mark the answer sheet, no, you have already somehow cheated, no, by looking ahead on the next test items. So do not do that. Students shouldn't be able to do that. So the best answer really is student like John should just recheck his or her answer once he or she or the student is done on a particular section of a test. So in that case, the other options are actually less ethical, or and we can actually say that some are unethical. So B really is the best answer. Okay, so I hope you are able also to get that. No, those who are watching, you are able to also get the correct answer. Okay, so let's see. What about our teachers who took the inventory? Okay, 67%. Okay, so majority of the teachers who took the inventory actually got the correct answer. Okay, and surprisingly, interestingly, no, the next option with the second highest frequency of responses is option A. So let's revisit option A. Mary finishes the vocabulary section early. she checks her answers on the previous test section. Okay, so that's not actually acceptable, no? So that's acceptable because if Mary or any student would like to check her answers, you should only do that in the current section which you have just finished, no? Because you're done. Okay, no examiner should go back, no, to any section if the test is time bound per section, no.